Sending a saw through the mail seems like a funny thing to think about now. Maybe it sounds like something from an old cartoon. But for a long time, it was a very real problem, and was absolutely against the rules. The simple reason why was danger. Pure and simple danger. Think about a saw. It's a tool made to cut. It has sharp teeth. It's often made of heavy metal. It's not like sending a letter or a soft sweater. It's a hard, jagged thing. When you put something like that into the mail system, especially in the old days, bad things could happen. The post office, from its very start, had a big job. It had to move millions of items, big and small, from one place to another. And it had to do that safely. Every day, countless packages and letters got sorted, carried, and delivered. Each one of those items passed through many hands. People were loading mail bags, emptying them, tossing items onto carts, and stuffing them into sorting bins. It was a very hands-on process. Imagine being one of those postal workers. You're reaching into a big canvas mail bag. You're feeling around for letters, for small packages. Suddenly your hand brushes against something hard and sharp. Or worse, you grab it. A saw blade. Even a dull saw can cut deep if you're pulling it out of a bag the wrong way. A slip, a jerk, a moment of distraction, and someone could get seriously hurt. That's the most immediate reason. Personal safety, the safety of the men and women who worked the mail. Their jobs were already tough. They worked long hours, they handled a huge volume of stuff. Adding sharp, unprotected objects to that mix was just asking for trouble. And trouble, of course, arrived. Not only were the workers at risk, but so was the rest of the mail. A saw rattling around in a mailbag with someone's important documents, or a fragile family photo, or a new pair of glasses could do a lot of damage. It could rip open other packages, it could tear through letters, it could scratch valuable items. The Postal Service had a duty to deliver mail intact. A saw made that much harder. And then there was the equipment. Early sorting offices weren't full of fancy machines like today. But even simple sorting tables, mail carts, or the heavy canvas bags themselves could get damaged by a loose saw. A saw blade could snag on fabric, tear wood, or even bend if it got caught in something. All of these things cost time and money. They slowed down the mail. In the early days, people didn't always think about proper packaging. If you wanted to send something, you just sent it. A saw might just have a bit of paper wrapped around it, or maybe nothing at all. It would be put in a mailbag with everything else. There were no strong cardboard boxes as we know them today, not for everyday items. Padded envelopes were not a common thing, so a bare, dangerous saw was a real possibility. The post office had a big responsibility to its employees. It had a responsibility to the people who sent mail to make sure their letters and packages arrived safely. And it had a responsibility to the public to provide a reliable service. A loose saw threatened all of that. It was a clear and obvious problem. The rule against sending it was simply a matter of common sense, born from the harsh realities of handling a lot of varied items by hand, day in and day out. It was a basic safety measure. The story of that rule is really the story of the Postal Service learning how to do its job safely and effectively as it grew into a massive network. It wasn't about being picky. It was about preventing injuries and making sure the mail actually got where it was going without turning into a pile of torn paper and broken things. To understand why a rule against mailing a saw became necessary, you have to look at how mail used to work, especially in its younger days. It was a very different world. Back then, there weren't many rules, or at least not as many as there are now. People sent all sorts of things through the mail. It was like the Wild West for packages. In the very early days of mail, which stretches back centuries, it was often a local thing. A messenger would carry letters between towns. As countries grew, so did the need for more organized mail systems. But even as these systems became bigger, they didn't have the strict rules we see today. If you wanted to send something, you just tried to send it. There are even stories, some of them of truly bizarre things being sent. For example, people actually tried to mail children in the early 1900s, usually for short distances and with postage attached to their clothes. This sounds crazy now, but it shows the kind of anything goes mentality that existed before strict regulations were put in place. While mailing a child is an extreme example, it paints a picture of a postal service that was still figuring out its boundaries. It was a system that was largely unpoliced in terms of what could and could not be transported. The mail network grew incredibly fast, especially in countries like the United States. It went from a few post roads to a complex system reaching every corner of the nation. This expansion was a huge deal. It meant more people were sending more items, and these items were traveling much longer distances. They were going from cities to rural farms, across mountains, and over rivers. Think about how this mail traveled. It wasn't just in trucks like today. It went by horse, by stagecoach, by train, and sometimes even by boat. Each time the mail was transferred from one mode of transport to another, it was handled. Mail bags were loaded onto carriages, then offloaded, then put onto trains. At every single stop along the way, someone was touching that mail. Someone was responsible for moving it. This constant handling meant a higher chance of things going wrong. If a saw was just wrapped in paper, it wouldn't last long. The wrapping would tear. The blade would come free, then it would be rattling around in a canvas sack with all the other mail. Imagine a mail sack being tossed into a train car. That saw is going to be banging against everything inside. Also, there was a real lack of uniform rules. In one town, a postmaster might have one idea about what was okay to send. In another town, they might have a different idea. There were private carriers competing with government services. This meant no single set of standards everyone followed. It was messy. As the Postal Service became a huge national organization, this lack of uniformity became a big problem. They needed one set of rules that applied everywhere. People didn't always think about the challenges the postal system faced. They just wanted to send their stuff. They didn't think about the dozens of hands that would touch their package. They didn't think about the other packages that would be crammed next to it. They just saw the post office as a way to get something from point A to point B. This simple view is what led to people trying to send all sorts of inappropriate or dangerous items. The sheer volume of mail also played a role. As the population grew and economies expanded, more and more letters and packages were sent. It became impossible for postal workers to carefully inspect every single item. They couldn't open every package or unwrap every oddly shaped parcel. They had to rely on a system of rules, and on senders following those rules. When senders didn't follow them, or when no clear rules existed, problems arose. The era of the anything goes postal service had to end. The risks were just too great, both for the people working the mail and for the integrity of the mail itself. This is where the need for specific prohibitions, like the one against an unprotected saw, truly took root. Rules don't just appear out of nowhere. They usually come from something going wrong, often repeatedly. The rule against sending a saw through the mail was no different. It was born from real-world problems, from incidents that caused injury and damage. Think about the actual incidents that would have happened. A postal worker, reaching into a large mail sack in a dimly lit sorting room, might feel a sharp stab in their hand. They pull it out, bleeding, only to find the jagged teeth of a saw. A simple cut can turn into a serious infection in an age before modern medicine was easily available. Puncture wounds are even worse. These weren't isolated events, they were likely common enough to become a real concern. The Postal Service had a duty to protect its employees from preventable harm. Beyond human injury, there was the mail itself. Imagine sending important legal documents, or a delicate photograph, or a new pair of eyeglasses. If those items were in a canvas bag with a loose saw, what do you think would happen? The saw would tear through envelopes, scratch photographs, and shatter glass. A letter meant for a loved one could arrive ripped and unreadable. A business contract could be shredded, causing financial loss. The post office reputation for reliable delivery would suffer. People wouldn't trust the mail if their items arrived damaged all the time, and the equipment too. Those heavy canvas mailbags were expensive to replace. A saw blade could easily tear through the thick fabric. Sorting tables, often made of wood, could be deeply gouged. Mail carts could be damaged. While these might seem like small things, they added up. Every damaged piece of equipment cost money and time to repair or replace, slowing down the entire system. These repeated incidents made it clear that something had to change. The Postmaster General, the head of the Postal Service, had the authority to set regulations. These regulations weren't just random choices. They were direct responses to problems faced by the thousands of people working in the mail system every day. The rule about saws wasn't unique. It was part of a larger list that became known as prohibited articles. This list grew over time as the Postal Service learned what was dangerous, what was too fragile to ship without special care, and what simply couldn't be handled by the existing system. Explosives were an obvious no-go. Poisons too. Flammable liquids. Glass items without proper protection. No perishable goods that would spoil and smell up a mailbag. Live animals in most cases were also eventually restricted, though that came with its own set of arguments. A saw, then, represented a category of items dangerous, sharp objects. The rule wasn't just about a specific brand of saw, it was about anything that could cut, stab, or tear. Over time, the definitions became more detailed. It wasn't just no saws, but also rules about how other tools or sharp objects could be sent if they were properly sheathed and packaged in sturdy containers. This showed a progression from a blanket ban to more nuanced rules about packaging and safety. Enforcing these rules was a challenge. Post office clerks had to inspect packages as best they could. They relied on senders being honest about what they were sending. Fines could be levied for breaking the rules. And importantly, a post office could simply refuse to accept an item if it looked dangerous or improperly packaged. This power of refusal was key to getting people to follow the rules. The concept of mailability became very important. Not everything was suitable for the mail. The Postal Service was not a universal carrier for any item. It had specific duties and limitations. The rules, like the one against an unprotected saw, helped define what the Postal Service was and what it wasn't. They drew clear boundaries. Public awareness of these rules was spread through posters, in post offices, pamphlets, and through the clerks themselves who would advise customers. The genesis of prohibited items was a necessary step to bring order and safety to a rapidly expanding and often chaotic system. It was about creating a postal service that could reliably and safely serve a growing nation. The rules about not sending a bear saw or other dangerous items weren't just about avoiding a few cuts. They were part of a much bigger philosophy, the fundamental principles of postal safety and logistics. Any large-scale shipping system, whether it's the post office or a modern courier service, has to think about these things. First, there's the core idea of protecting everyone in the chain. This means the postal workers who handle the mail at every stage, the people at the counter, the sorters, the loaders, the carriers. Their safety is paramount. An injured worker means not just pain for them, but also a disruption to service, potential lawsuits, and a loss of skilled labor. The Postal Service, as an employer, had an ethical and practical obligation to minimize these risks. Then there's the integrity of the mail itself. The Postal Service promises to deliver items. That promise implies they will arrive in the condition they were sent, or at least not totally destroyed. A saw rattling around in a mailbag compromises that promise for every other item in that bag. If people couldn't trust the mail to deliver their goods safely, they wouldn't use it. This would undermine the entire purpose of the Postal Service. The solution to a bear saw wasn't to ban saws forever. It was to introduce the concept of proper packaging. This is a crucial distinction. A saw, properly sheathed and enclosed in a sturdy box, becomes a much less dangerous item. The burden for this safety falls on the sender. It's the sender's responsibility to make sure their item is safe to travel through the system. This meant using strong containers, adding padding, and making sure sharp edges were covered. This shift from "you can't send this" to "you can send this if you make it safe" was a big step in postal evolution. Think about the sheer logistical challenge. The Postal Service doesn't just move items from one point to another. It moves them through a complex network of sorting hubs, transportation routes, and delivery points. A single dangerous item can slow down or endanger the entire system. If a mailbag is compromised by a sharp object, it might need to be taken out of service, sorted by hand, and its contents inspected. This causes delays for everyone's mail. It's a ripple effect. There's also a significant financial cost to damage. Replacing mail that's been destroyed by another item, paying for medical care for injured workers, and repairing damaged equipment all add up. These costs are ultimately borne by the Postal Service and, by extension, the taxpayers or customers. Strict rules, therefore, were not just about safety but also about economic efficiency. It was cheaper to have rules and enforce them than to constantly deal with the aftermath of accidents and damage. Public trust was another huge factor. In an era before instant communication and online shopping, people relied on the mail for everything: business correspondence, personal letters to distant relatives, vital medicine, official documents, and increasingly, goods purchased through catalogs. For the mail to function as a vital artery of commerce and communication, people had to have absolute faith in its reliability and safety. If the mail was known for injuring workers or destroying contents, that trust would erode quickly. This philosophy of safety and logistics isn't unique to the historical Postal Service. It's universal. Look at modern shipping companies like UPS or FedEx. They have even more stringent rules about what can and cannot be sent and how items must be packaged. They have specific categories for hazardous materials, and they charge more for items that require special handling. This shows that the basic problems that led to the no bear saw rule are still relevant today, even with all our advanced technology. The underlying principles of protecting people, property, and the system itself remain unchanged. The saw rule, in a way, was an early, simple expression of these timeless logistical truths. The seemingly simple rule about not mailing a saw, born from the rough and tumble early days of postal service, actually has a strong echo in how mail works today. While you won't see specific signs saying no saws, the principles behind that old rule are still very much in place. Are saws still illegal to send through the mail? Not entirely. Today you can send a saw or a knife or any other sharp tool. But, and this is the crucial part, it absolutely must be packaged correctly. The rules require that all sharp points and edges be protected. This often means sheathing the blade, wrapping it in heavy-duty material, and then placing it in a sturdy box that can withstand the rigors of transit. The item must not be able to shift inside the package, and there should be no way for the sharp parts to poke through. This evolution from a blanket ban to a conditional acceptance shows progress. It reflects advances in packaging technology. We now have strong cardboard boxes, bubble wrap, packing peanuts, and other materials that make it much easier to secure a dangerous item. In the old days, these options weren't widely available or affordable, so the old no-saw rule was a practical response to the packaging limitations of the time. The philosophical continuity is clear safety remains the top priority. The core reason protecting postal workers, protecting other mail, and protecting equipment does is the same. What has changed are the methods we use to achieve that safety. The Postal Service, through its current regulations for sharp objects, continues to uphold the spirit of that original rule. It acknowledges that some items are inherently more dangerous, and therefore they require extra care from the sender. This approach isn't just national, it's global. The Universal Postal Union (UPU), an international organization, sets standards for postal services around the world. These international agreements often include harmonized rules for hazardous materials and dangerous goods. This means that the principles behind the no-bear-saw rule are understood and applied by postal services in almost every country. It's a universal recognition of a universal problem in shipping. The saw itself has become a symbol. It stands for any object that, if unprotected, poses an inherent immediate risk. It represents the countless small practical challenges that the Postal Service faced as it grew. From acids and poisons to fragile glass and, yes, sharp saws, each presented a problem that had to be addressed through clear regulation. These rules weren't about being bureaucratic, they were about making a massive interconnected system work safely and reliably for everyone involved. The Postal Service has come a long way from its wild youth. It's now a highly regulated, sophisticated logistical network. But the lessons learned from those early days, often the hard way through injuries and damaged mail, continue to inform its operations. The no-bear-saw rule is a testament to the fact that seemingly simple rules often have deep historical roots and very real, very practical concerns about safety and efficiency. So, when we look back and wonder why it was illegal to send a saw through the mail, we're not just looking at a quirky old regulation. We're looking at a piece of the Postal Service's history. We see the evolution of safety standards, the development of packaging requirements, and the enduring commitment to protecting both the people who work with the mail and the mail itself. The saw, in its sharp metallic simplicity, helped define the boundaries of what the mail system could and should carry, ensuring that what was delivered was not just mail, but also safety and trust. It's a small rule with a big story, one that reminds us that even the most complex systems are built on a foundation of basic human needs for security and reliability.